Hi there. My name is Rebecca Hazelton, and I want to start by thanking you so much for joining me for this virtual book launch of my book of poetry, Generic Husband, from LSU Press. If you don't know me, my name, as I mentioned, is Rebecca Hazelton, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my biography, but that always feels a little weird, so bear with me. Um, as a poet, I've previously been published. I've published three books of poetry, Fair Copy, Vow, and Gloss, and I've had poems published in magazines, journals, and anthologies such as The New Yorker, Poetry Magazine, Best American Poetry, and the Pushcart Prize. Um, when it comes to personal biography, I'll mention that I grew up in the South, but I fell in love with the Midwest several years ago, and I've been enjoying seasonal depression ever since. So I'm really excited to tell you about this book, and I want to thank LSU for the care that they've put into the book. From the beginning acceptance of the book, the editing process, the peer review, the cover design, they have been amazing. I've been so lucky, and I cannot tell you how much I love the cover. It's completely perfect. We have our perhaps our generic husband here mowing the lawn. And mowing the lawn is a recurrent image in this book. I think because it's a very masculine coded activity like washing cars or grilling. So it's going to be a lot in here. And tellingly, it's a very solitary activity, which is something that interests me. So when it comes to what this book is about, what it's doing, how I see it in terms of my previous career as a writer, I will say that this book does depart in some ways from my usual subjects, and in other ways, it's completely consistent. So, in my previous work, I've always been interested in the role of gender in our lives, but I've concentrated more on women, specifically the roles that women may feel societally compelled to play, such as wife or mistress or ingenue or shrew. Um, I've also really enjoyed exploring the kind of differing power dynamics that we get within relationships when these various societal pressures to perform come into play. Because how do you know what's real, like what's real love, if you cannot always be your authentic self? So that uncertainty has always really interested me. In this book, however, I turned my attention to the figure of the husband because men are also expected to meet certain societal expectations. In many ways, I think being masculine is in some ways more difficult because it can be seemingly so rigid and narrow. Um, what it means to be a husband and to be a man can be really nebulous. And somehow everyone knows what a husband is, and at the same time, no one can quite agree on how it should behave, what it should look like. So I got really into the idea of the husband and wondering what that word meant to other people, what it means in different contexts, what it means when the husband is queer, when the marriage is queer. Um, the more I thought about what a husband is, the more different versions of husbands appeared to me. So if you go through this book, you will find that there are crypto husbands, foolish husbands, optimistic husbands. And then, of course, they all are assembled under this title, generic husband, just to drive home the fact that there is no generic husband, that there is no one sole way of being a husband or being a man. So, in this reading, this book talk, this reading, I'm going to share probably 5 or 6 poems with you, but before each one and after, I'm gonna stop and talk and give you a little context, maybe tell you where the seed of this poem came from or how I see it playing into the book as a whole. Um, I'm aiming for about 20 minutes of talking and reading before we move to Q&A. So we're gonna see how my timing goes. I will periodically be kind of glancing to the side. Part of that is because I have a timer going. I really have to like make sure I understand that time is passing. So I just want to make you aware that if I look off to the side, I am either looking at my notes or I'm looking at the timer. I am not looking at anyone else here because I don't have any friends. Yeah, no, that was a joke, we think. All right. So I'm going to kick us off by reading the titular poem, Generic Husband. Um, this is a poem that was very much inspired by living in the suburbs, which is something I have done now for 10 years and was very, very weird to me when I began and still continues to feel a little strange. Um, and living in the suburbs, I found myself observing a certain kind of visual sameness to many of the men around me. Like similar cars being driven, similar clothes for work, their weekend activities, from what I could see, seemed very similar. Um, but I've also started thinking about how that visual sameness can be a kind of camouflage, for the private self within. So we have this poem. Oh, I'll also mention I have a cough and I have a froggy throat. So I may cough. I may periodically sip from this to try and sound a little less terrible. All right, here we go. Immediately turned to the wrong one. Here we are. Generic husband. Who mows the lawn? Who prunes the rangy rose? Who whacks the weeds by the chain length with mafioso panache? Who drinks the beer? Who has no questions? Who knots a tie four in hand? Who washes the car? Who drives stick? Who smoked but did not inhale? Who wears the drugstore cologne his kid gave him? Who wakes up beside the same wife? Who has no questions? Who parts his hair? Who has a bald patch? Who plays golf? Who plays Call of Duty? Who plays the stock market responsibly? Who reads biographies of generals? Who does not dream? Who climbed trees as a boy? Who leaves his towel beside the hamper? Who has never swum nude? Who knows cardinal directions? Who sees the sunset without a sense of unease? Who walks to the train? Who watches sports? Who reclines? Who maintains a sense of calm? Who has a small, bad tattoo? Who wears humorous socks? Who tells the tame, dirty joke? Who reads the newspaper online? Who is politically unmoved? Who had a job upon graduation? Who go-gets? Who has no questions? Who shovels the walk? Who did not keep his letters from his college sweetheart? Who had a college sweetheart? Who called her baby? Who was sincere? Who did not ask why she left him? Who does not climb trees? Who drinks one beer at the end of the day? Who remembers meeting his wife and how young she was then? Who does not question? Who kills the spider? Who clips a dog with his car and keeps driving? Who adjusts the mirror? All right. So once I started thinking about different types of husbands, they took over my brain a little bit. I started seeing different types of husbands everywhere, which is how the next poem, More Husbands, came to be. It's the opening poem in the collection, and it's my hope that it sets the tone for the book. I hope that it sets the tone as being playful, surprising, maybe sometimes a little bit sad. In writing this, I was really amused by the idea of proliferating husbands. And I was also thinking about the ways in which men can impose standards of masculinity on one another. All right, more husbands. The husbands have a plan. The plan is to make more husbands. More husbands, more problems is a thing the husbands have never said. The more husbands there are, the more husbands there will be. Husbands beget husbands. The cities will be full of husbands. Husbands will spill from the upper stories of apartment buildings. Husbands will clog the canals of Amsterdam. Husbands will walk across the Grand Canyon on the bodies of other husbands. There will be so many husbands that husbands will seem interchangeable. One husband is much like another husband in the dark. Even now, the orchards are full of husbands ripening in the afternoon sun. The farmer's market sells fresh young husbands every spring. But artisanal husbands are not cost effective. The husbands are building a factory to modernize the making of husbands. Now every husband working the line has their hands on just one part of another husband in production. Some of the beauty of creation is lost, but speed is everything. One day, a husband will ask his husband to get him a glass of water, and that husband will pause over the kitchen sink, looking out the window. He'll see a wild husband furtively slink across the front yard, then then duck out of sight into a culvert. There but for the grace of God, says the husband, but he shivers all the same. Um, So husbands are, of course, associated with marriage, hence the term. But like husbands, marriage itself is a term, a concept, an idea that is always under construction, or perhaps I should say negotiation between its partners. Um, and there are countless love poems in the world. Unfortunately, I'm responsible for my share of them that if I can generalize, often focus on the first flush of infatuation or the heady rush of consummation or what happens when love is vexed or toxic. There aren't, in my experience, as many poems that think about love in the long term, that consider what love and marriage looks like over decades. Um, when I write about marriage in this book, I'm writing about queer husbands and queer marriages, queer love, and with it, all the ways in which love can maintain over the years and all the ways in which one person can't be everything, can't be expected to be everything for another person. So this poem is called Things the Husband Will Not Say. And I feel the need to tell you that there are a number of poems in here called The Husband Speaks, where we seemingly have a husband answering questions. We don't have access to the questions, but we have the answers. But this, however, this is a poem called Things the Husbands Will Not Say. Here's the old feeling again. Hunger in the body and nowhere to put it. But the old feeling is new every time, and every time I forget what it is to believe in its satisfaction. Some people have a persistent sadness that stains them through and through, like a man's hands tinge the color of an old Bible after decades of smoking. They have a hurt and layer it with nacre until it's a bulbous pearl, but it's still the same accident covered over. It's like that with desire. I push it down and up it comes years again later, refined, darker, more lustrous. I am speaking metaphorically. I am not speaking drastically. If I tell you I want what you cannot give me, you will fail to try. Or worse, you will. And I can't bear to see you once more awkward in a harness, gamely locking in a ridiculous purple dildo. When I say I'm hungry, I mean there was a man in a bathroom in Glasgow who understood me well enough. And sometimes I miss the men whose names I never knew. But I love you, mostly. And mostly I can compress this feeling into a tight diamond for your hand. We are years away from talking without metaphors. So, whenever I read a serious poem, I just feel the need to read a less serious poem, a lighter poem as a counterpoint. So this is going to happen to you now. Um, I'm going to read to you one of my favorite poems in the book. It's a favorite not only because it's a lot of fun to read, although I'm really questioning my choice considering how froggy I am, um, but because I think it captures something about the sort of ubiquitous nature of husbands conceptually, and how exhausting it must be to always be trying to reach an unattainable ideal. The husbands are running. Gotta take a breath. The husbands are running over hill, over dale. The husbands are running, they run. The husbands are running, they vault picket fences. The husbands are running. The husbands pump their arms. The husbands loosen their ties. The husbands are running, they run. The husbands' cufflinks are dropping like bullets. The husbands are running, they leap over boxwoods. The husbands are running. The husbands, they run. They kick off their shoes. They hop off their socks. They run. The belts are slithering and flying away. The husbands are running. The husbands race. The dogs howl. The husbands, they run. The backyards are full of the husbands running. The husbands call to the husbands to run. The husbands are running. They run. The husbands drop trousers. The husbands in boxers. The husbands in briefs. The husbands are running. The button downs unbuttoning. The husbands are running. The hair receding and the paunch is rising. The husbands are running, they run. The husbands on statins, the husbands gone vegan. The husband with heart stents, the husbands are running, they run. The husbands run ragged, the husbands run weary. They run, golden in the fading light, the sun retreating. The husbands are running, the husbands they run. The husbands as one, the husbands they run. All right, so I am married. I liked it so much I did it twice. And if you write a lot of poems about husbands and about marriage, it's pretty inevitable that someone will start shooting your actual real life husband concerned or pitying looks. I always find this to be really amusing because in my career, I've written a number of poems that gleefully outline violent acts. And I guess I can only presume that my readers read that, took a look at me, and then thought, yeah, that tracks. Um, I suppose I want to tell you that these poems are not about my husband, mostly. There are a few. And with that in mind, I want to share with you a poem that aptly enough is called Specific Husband because it is looking at a specific husband. And it's inspired by, my real life husband. In 2020, at the very start of the pandemic, I contracted COVID and I committed to the bit. Over the next several years, I was in varying states of ill health. Um, it's one of those experiences that I think changes you as a person in terms of your relationship to, your own well-being and death conceptually, but also changes the way that you view a relationship, a marriage. My husband was absolutely a rock during this period, or at least I think he was because I actually don't remember much, but I'm told he was really good. And he built a kind of, we called it the fairy house. He built a kind of structure in our backyard out of deadfall. And it was something that we built together. And then I fell ill and I couldn't take part in it in the same way. And thinking about that image, I wrote this poem. So it's about him, I suppose, I'll admit, and also around the kinds of expected narratives that we have around illness. All right. Specific husband. The world was sick and he couldn't fix it. Oh, sorry. Before I go further, I want to mention something. Periodically, there is a second voice that comes into this poem. In the text, it's italicized, so you can see it really clearly. To the extent that I can, I'll try to kind of, I don't know, indicate that it's someone else speaking, but occasionally you'll have a little bit of a Q&A in here. I'll try again. Specific husband. The world was sick and he couldn't fix it. So we gathered deadfall into a pile in the backyard. He, you mean you? Yes, he had a plan and a reciprocating saw. He cut larger into smaller. He stabbed the ground with the sharpened ends of the thicker branches until they sunk, and those were his supports. The more pliant, thinner branches he wove between the poles. Did it help? It did not help. Surfaces still had to be wiped uselessly, masks worn. The news poured in and filled his home to the brim with wet leaves. Whole countries became sick. Cities became sick. His wife became sick. He could not fix it. Sometimes he reinforced the weaving with twine. Other times he used the pressure of one branch against another, the way his wife had provided a resistance that was also a support. This is still you. Yes. What were you making? It was a basket that couldn't hold. It was a deer's nest. Then what? He laced the softest branches into a canopy through which one could see the true canopy above. When his wife was weak, he would carry her to what he had made and lay her inside. Did it help? It did not help. But it did not hurt either. She was an egg inside a nest. He monitored her oxygen. He monitored her speech for slurring. Did she hatch? No. The months dragged in snow. The snow turned the structure into a lace collar. Wind blew through. Then daffodils pricked out everywhere. Then crocuses. The structure was still standing. He trimmed the border with a weed whacker and let the grass inside grow long. He trained vines over it, and one day it erupted into a tangle of petals, tendrils, tender leaves. And then she got better. He dismantled it. She is still sick. So I'm going to end my book talk and reading with one final poem. This poem is called My Husband. It is actually the first husband poem that I wrote. And I think I wrote it back in 2013. Unusually, most of my poetry books, I've tended to write all the poems in them during like a close set of time, sometimes even over like a couple of months, although of course they were highly refined after that. This book is quite different in that these husband poems have come out in small little bits over the years. So in some ways, I feel like it's a more contemplative book. So this is called My Husband. My husband in the house. My husband on the lawn, pushing the mower, 4th of July. The way my husband's sweat wends like Crown Royale to the waistband of his shorts. The slow motion shake of the head, the water running down his chest. All of this lit like a warrant video. Cherry pie, his cutoffs, his blonde hair, his air guitar crescendo. My husband at the PTA meeting. My husband warming milk at 3 a.m. while I sleep. My husband washing the white Corvette, the bare chest and the soap, the objectification of my husband by the pram pushers and mailman. My husband at Home Depot asking where the bolts are, the nuts, the screws. My God, it's filthy. My husband reading from the news. My husband cooking French toast, Belgian waffles. My husband for all nationalities. My husband, sorry, I lost my place. My husband with a scotch. My husband with his shoes off, his slippers on. My husband's golden leg hairs in the glow of a reading lamp. My husband bearded. My husband shaved. The way my husband taps out the razor, the small hairs in the sink. My husband with tweezers to my foot, to a splinter I carried for years. My husband chiding me for waiting to remove what pained me. My husband brandishing the sliver to the light and laughing. Thank you so much for listening to my talk and my poems, and I would love to take some questions from you if you have any.
Thank you so much for this, Rebecca. It was a wonderful presentation, and I really love the conceit of this book. So thank you for giving the husband the layers the husband deserves, like this sort of, this non-specific husband. It's actually really interesting, you know, like like husband having this really assumed role, and we're all living in this world that's changing, right? And we're fighting against or playing with or kind of like absorbing these kinds of roles that that we're like, well, what are these things? Like we have these images that are here, and we're like, well, what are we in relation to them? So it was really cool to experience this. What is a husband? What does a husband do? What doesn't it do? So, thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I was gonna ask you what you were kind of reading and or writing when you were writing this book, but since it is a book that had a long time to evolve, I'm guessing I wanted to ask you instead, how did the book evolve? What kind of shape did it take as you were?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think I mentioned that in previous books, I had written them all within a very set amount of time. My previous books had been written in a, uh, I don't know, like a little bit of a blaze. I think when I wrote Vow, I think I wrote that book in like 3 or 4 months. I was not a happy person. I was not taking care of myself, but I wrote a lot of poems. My first book, Fair Copy, I wrote that when I was studying for my prelims for my PhD because I didn't want to do my work. So that was also a period of several months. Gloss also was pretty compressed. But this one, I didn't actually know I was writing it. I had, of course, been writing poems about wives, the figure of the wife for, over like decades, I guess. And every now and then I would maybe write a poem from the perspective of, the husband involved or the man involved, or I would start thinking about um, what do we mean when we say someone is masculine? And, a little poem would come out, but I wouldn't think much of it. I didn't think of it as a project that I was working on. Um, I was trying to put together a book of poems, and I was really struggling. I had a lot of poems that I had written over, several years, 3 or 4 years, because I was so sick for a long time. My usual writing process was really disrupted. And I was kind of going through what I had and trying to figure out, do I have a book? Do I have something that's working towards it? And I kept trying to cram a bunch of poems into this, like, it's embarrassing. It's like, it's some kind of structure that had to do with cities. It did not work. It did not make a lot of sense. But what I started to notice was that there were these poems inside this book that wasn't going to work that all had to do with the husband. And that was interesting to me because it was a thing I didn't realize I was writing. So once I noticed that as a potential pattern, I started just playing around. And I wrote some poems that didn't get into the book just because I was having a good time. But I yeah, I just started kind of riffing off of it, both in terms of the sort of playful archetypes, like Crypto Husband is a poem in here, which was very much like modeled on the idea of the crypto bro. And I spent a lot of time on Wikipedia trying to understand crypto, and I will say that I do not. But I did get to use some of the language around its architecture to talk about husbands and the ways in which we share knowledge or have secrets. Um, yeah, so it was very much a book that came about as a kind of surprise to me. And I suppose I will also say that I put the book together and I was pleased with it and I was proud. But if you have any familiarity with trying to get a book of poems published, it's a dreadful process, right? Because poetry does not make money. And so you're typically sending out to contests, which cost money that goes towards presses. And um, engaging with that system was kind of exhausting. And so I tried a little bit, and then I just was like, I don't know, I think I'm going to shelve this. And my husband actually said to me, I think this is the best book you've written, and I'm going to be a little angry with you if you don't put it out there. So I was bullied into it in the best possible way. And that's how we ended up where we are. That was a very long answer.
No, that was a perfect answer. And I feel like we learned a lot about yeah, this book. I am curious about one thing. Um, did you think about Anne Carson at all? I'm thinking of The Beauty of the Husband when
Yes,
you were
yeah.
okay.
It's not a book that I was reading while I wrote this, somewhat because I was a little afraid it would either too much infect what I was doing, or that I would just read it and go like, well, I can't do it that good and talk myself out of it. But The Beauty of the Husband is a book that I read so many times, in my past. And so I'm very familiar with it. I'm very fond of it. Yeah. And there are poems in this book that are about, essentially the beauty of the husband. The husband having a sense of his beauty as a young man, being particularly androgynous and like how that changes over time. Yeah, so there's a little bit of borrowing in here as well.
It's such a balance in that case, like reading things that can really inspire us and making our own art.
Yeah.
I'm interested. I want to talk to you about repetition because I feel like such a strong feature of these poems, and I'm thinking about on the language level, right? Like the husbands, but then on the visual level too. You mentioned kind of like the camouflage that is the husband, or like a sameness. So can you just, I mean, can you tell me a little bit about kind of like the modes of repetition works in this collection?
Yeah. So the use of repetition in my work is something that I started doing probably with my second book, Vow. I basically It's like I just suddenly learned what anaphora was, and I was like, I'm all in. I probably had to like pull back a little bit because I was getting a bit habitual with it. But one of the things I love about a repeated word or repeated phrase is the way that the each iteration can kind of stack on the previous one, but it also echoes backwards towards to the last time that you said it. So you can have kind of a series of echoes running through the poem, and it creates emphasis, of course, but I feel like it also can create wonderful musicality. Um, I'm a free verse poet. I don't I don't often intentionally use meter. So it's a way for me to have some of the musicality that I think our more formal poets make better use of. Yeah.
We got a comment in the chat from Kaylin. It's not a question, but just wanted to say how great it was to hear your poems read in your voice with your inflection and emphasis. It was such a treat. So I wanted to share that with you.
Gosh, thank you, Kaylin. I really appreciate that. Thank you for listening. And I flubbed them a couple of times and I got a little flustered. So I'm glad that that didn't impact things too much. I really appreciate it.
I I wanted to ask you a little bit about now that this book is out, what you are working on now. Like what's next for you?
Yeah, so right now I am doing final edits on a second young adult novel. My first young adult novel called Rabbit and Juliet came out in September 2024 from Quill Tree Books. Oh, I keep wanting to say press, but I believe it's books, which is our HarperCollins subsidiary. Um, this is my second book with them. It's called The Ending You Deserve. And we're in the final stages. I actually have to return it to my editor on Monday. So fingers crossed I get through the remaining changes. So I'd say that over the last couple of years, like writing fiction has sort of dominated my creative life. But I recently was reminded by a friend who's doing a project that might speak to it of some essays I had written about, oddly enough, masculinity, and about, um, uh, how would I want to put it? Masculinity, but also the ways in which these expectations can be kind of deforming to like the soul. That sounds very dramatic, but um, when we have these expectations on how people have to act, it can be an incredible amount of pressure, and it can also result in some real ugliness as people try to sort of negotiate that or meet that standard. So there are these essays I wrote a couple of years back. One of them was called "The Man," a compilation, which was and still is on Kenyon Review online. Um, and the other one, Best American Essay, which is on LitHub. And in these, I was thinking a lot about, as I said, masculinity, but also particularly about power inequities within the field of creative writing. Um, and these were interesting essays to write. I actually had women from other fields writing to me. I had some people write to me from STEM fields saying like, this is what it is like in my job. So I've been thinking about returning to those essays because I feel like I have more to say. Um, but they're also quite difficult for me because they are outside of the genres that I'm comfortable with. And I feel like I don't quite know what I'm doing as much, but I think that makes it more interesting for me as an artist, and I hope eventually more interesting for the reader once I get my hands around it. But yeah, I think that's where I'm heading next once I wrap up this YA novel.
Is there anything that you can tell us about the YA novel right now, or is it a little under wraps at the moment?
That's a good question. I actually don't know how under wraps I'm supposed to be. Um, well, I was talking with a friend about its subject matter, and she was like, "Oh, so like your books have a theme, and it's all about like sexual predators." And I'm like, "Yeah, they're super happy books." But I mean, I think they are. They're kind of funny. This is a book about a young woman who is desperate to remain in her boarding arts high school. It's incredibly important to her in terms of sort of escaping certain like fam issues she has at home with her family, and in terms of being in a place where she feels she can actually explore art and find the things that she needs to kind of feed her creatively. And she finds herself in a situation where she has to choose to do some pretty unethical things to stay in this school. So I think that's as much as I'll say right now, both because I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to talk about it, and also because I'm really bad at talking about my novels. So like I do so much better when I have like a little paragraph to lean on. You're supposed to be able to do an elevator pitch. No. If I can do an elevator pitch, it's like the elevator is plummeting to the ground because the cable snapped. I'm really bad at it.
No, that was great, and I we're wishing you the best of luck on that book, and as well as the essay collection.
You.
Yeah, rooting for you to do the
I
essay
appreciate you
collection.
calling it essay collection. I don't know if we're there, but I like that
I
idea.
like that, we're gonna call it an essay collection because that's what it sounds like. And I just really appreciate your time this afternoon, for spending time with us. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in for spending this afternoon with us as well. This is just a reminder to everyone that you can get 40% off Rebecca's book using the link in the chat. And um, this is the beautiful, yes, generic husband available now. Rebecca, do you have anything else before we sign off?
No, I think that's it. I'm just incredibly happy to have gotten to spend this time with you all virtually. And thank you so much.